But the goal of today is to really just talk about how to tell a story in slides. And just to get a little background on myself and what we're doing, I created a company called Brevity, which is really designed to provide self-service software to help professionals deliver clear and compelling pitches. And during our journey, we discovered some interesting data that we're honestly competing against when we're trying to tell an effective, clear, and compelling story. And it's that people forget 90% of what they learn in a presentation, and usually 50% within the first 20 minutes. So knowing that we're competing against this, it's good to understand what are we potentially doing to not help with people remembering. So we've identified a few learnings in our journey from number one, people being too verbose. Number two, not necessarily communicating with simple layman, language in layman's terms, and they're missing key elements that their audience usually desires. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is, well, how do we address that? So our software platform that will be launched in fall, we have a beta product out right now, but it's all about helping professionals deliver clear and compelling pitches. And where we're going to spend majority of our time today is we've created a framework called SOUL. The best stories usually have soul. And so that's really phase one of our software platform. And then phase two is really what we call pitch intelligence, scores and suggestions on ways to improve your clarity, concision, to better influence your target audience. And then the last phase of our software is really the human feedback loops. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence can't tell you if you retain or if something is memorable. So it comes down to getting that feedback from humans. So we're providing a way to facilitate that human feedback. So the big rules for today, Jessica hit on it. One of the ones, really, vulnerability is absolutely encouraged. She said we're experts, we're still learning, we don't have all the answers. So part of our presentation is showing you guys some of our slides. We're actually going through, we raised capital in Q1 of this year. We're doing a new round of fundraising, and my COO was like, we got to revise our pitch deck. So it's a constant journey, but number one, we want to make sure we all have fun today. Constructive feedback is encouraged, and as Jessica and Jamie mentioned, jump in with questions at any time. We want to make sure that this is super interactive. And the goal today is to really learn how to tell that story, learn what a story structure is, but then how do we infuse that into slides? So we have 5 phases, and the first is really having a clear goal and objective for your pitch and your presentation. And phase 2, which we'll spend most of our presentation on, is what is SOUL? What does that acronym mean, and how does that fit within the larger narrative? And then from there, once you understand those prompting statements, it's really about what you guys have probably already have done is brainstorming and getting all of the supporting research and evidence that then fits into that SOUL framework. And I guess one of the hardest parts about the 15 slide requirement, or a time-based pitch, whether you're doing 60 seconds or 3 minutes, how do I import all of that information in those time parameters? Because all of our great ideas usually have a lot of value, but we have to really prioritize for the specific audience we're trying to influence. And then the last phase is really around the compelling nature of your pitch. Number one, you want to make sure someone has a clear understanding as to what you do, but the other thing you're competing against is the memorability. So we're going to talk about how we can make sure your idea can stand on its own, but secondly, how can we infuse different storytelling techniques to where people are highly engaged and they remember your solution 14 days, 21 days down the line. So I'm going to transition into our SOUL framework. Not read everything on the slide, but The S in soul stands for stating the target audience and the problem. And the mini checklist we have on the left here is, number one, you want people to have a clear understanding for your reason for being. Number two, who's the specific audience that's impacted? You know, even our tool Brevity can be applied to entrepreneurs, sales professionals, you know, priests giving a sermon, right? But who's the actual specific audience that's being impacted? And then after this, we should have a clear understanding as to what problem you're solving. Let me see in the chat here. Oh, sweet. And then the number one tip we have in this section here is really limiting the number of problems, concerns that you're addressing. And then the audience usually retains the information best with one key focus and key takeaway. The O of soul stands for outlining how and why your solution works. This can be best done with either sequential steps, mock-ups, a demo, but then after that, you want to get into why your solution is different, better compared to alternatives, to competitors, or doing nothing at all. And at this point, the reader or recipient of the information should have a clear understanding to the relevant and specific context of where your solution helps. And what we've found is when you can, before you even get to the slide deck, if you can explain this section well linguistically with your words, you can it ends up resulting in more powerful demos and visuals when you take that time to write out how and why your solution is effective. Favorite part here, the U in the SOUL acronym stands for the upside, potential, and proof. Really getting into what does life look like after using your solution? You know, a clear before and after. And in this section, you can communicate compelling facts, figures, and logic, or even better, third-party validated evidence that this is real. This is a viable opportunity. And again, easier said than done. It's very easy to list your product or service may have about 20 different unique benefits, but really prioritizing it and narrowing it down to the most important benefits and proof points. Again, it's easier for the audience to remember. And then the last section here is for L, is really around the leader's needs and capability. Most important, why you, why your team, why your company has a proven track record to execute on the S, O, and U. If you have an offer or an ask at this point, you know, I'm looking to raise 200, you know, you're making sure that you're communicating how you plan to deploy those funds. And then the big thing here is usually our previous experience is an indicator of future success. So not being shy to communicate what you've done in your previous work experience, your team are really good ways to stand out here. So this is just kind of the first, just wanted to explain the concept of soul. The main purpose is really to help. Number one, people need to understand your concept first. Number two, they need to understand the relevant context second. And then the third phase is really around the actualization. How does this become real? Third. And when you tell a story in that sequence, it ends up, you know, it's a lot easier for your audience to get the concept. I'll stop here.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Is it a good idea with the deck that we submit to also submit speaker notes?
I can take that one actually, Lano. And that's a good framing for everybody going forward. This is just going to be submitted as a PDF. So the slides have to stand on their own. Like the message has to be clear enough. It has to be easy enough to follow. that you there wouldn't be any other speaker notes, there's no voiceover, so you can't actually speak this presentation, which is different than some of the other advice or like pitch coaching you might get for like a live in-person pitch or something that you're doing where you can speak to the slides. This one, in this instance, you're just submitting slides that, yeah, they have to stand on their own.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. Hi, Kelvin. This is
Hey,
Holly
Holly.
LaRochelle. Hi. And I guess maybe this is for both you and Jessica. The slide template that was provided to us on the Google site, does this line up with the kind of the formatting and the approach that Kelvin you're advocating for in this presentation, or are they kind of two separate things?
I will take a stab at that, and then Kelvin, I don't expect you to remember every little ordered slide in that template we shared, but from Minnesota Cup's perspective, we share that with you as a starting point so that if this is the very first time that you're making a pitch deck, you at least have some high level categories of, oh yeah, if I haven't spoken to or if I haven't said anything about this big category of information, I'll think about that. But it's definitely not intended to be a rubric to follow that like you have to have one whole slide on each of those areas. I think for some people, it really depends on what your product or service is, how much real estate, like how much slides or how much space on each slide you contribute to any given section. So I actually do think that the sort of the methodology and like the framework that Kelvin's describing matches that list really well. But like, it's totally up to you. Reorder them, add something else. If you know for your industry that like, it's really critical that you talk about some other thing that we didn't include, like do it. Ours isn't meant to be like the end all be all list that if you do every single one of those things, then it's automatically great. But it's more meant to like, here's something to get you started or to be thinking about.
Yeah, great point, because even within our soul framework later on, the next portion of our presentation is going to really talk about how do we infuse soul into the 15 slides and how many recommended slides within each section. So that's going to be coming up. But even for our company, we built essentially we've created the Grammarly for pitching. So we can actually spend less time in the S section in terms of state to target audience and problem, because our problem is a little bit more immediate. It's kind of, when it's easier to understand and other people have more background, you can actually narrow down how much you talk about the problem, right? Versus if you're in a super, technical, biotech company and there's more education that needs to be framed up front. So it's more of a guideline and themes and not necessarily supposed to be super prescriptive.
Great, thank you. That answers my question.
Kelvin, I have a question. Could you add a little bit more to, you mentioned talking about one problem and minimal benefits. If we are a company that's solving multiple problems and has various audiences, what's the best way to, or any tips you have for going about navigating, narrowing that down to what is the most important? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, so even for my company, one of the challenges we have with our go-to-market is, my segment that I'm going after first is really the entrepreneurial segment, but then, enterprise sales, workforce innovation, another one is, I was at a conference, video game developers have to pitch all the time, right? So what I usually like to do is prioritize the one I'm primarily focused on, but in that upside proof and potential slide, I may tease out some of the other angles to kind of show this is what our focus is, but from an upside proof and potential, this is the greater piece of the market that we could go after. This is who else could use our tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So start where you're at, who you're targeting, and then just show that there's potential beyond that.
Correct.
Cool. Thank you.
Now, if you have different products for different solutions, you know, there may be ways to, you know, I'm a big fan of the phases, right? In phase one, like even if we go back here, these are 3 different products for brevity. The soul framework is one, you know, pitch intelligence is a different product. And then the human feedback loop is really, it's a different product. So I kind of infuse it all into one slide just to show the different phases of our total platform.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Do you have any advice of how to navigate having different products and just having it feel cohesive?
So different products that solve different problems?
Within the same universe, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. When we go to, I'll show you the number of slides in the next section within the outline how and why it works. If it's if it's a smooth transition, you may be able to pack that all into those 4 slides for the different products and the different benefits. However, if it gets too noisy and it's not a cohesive story, we also have appendix slide recommendations as well.
Okay. Is it okay to rely on like photos? Because I feel like with clothing, like that's the easiest way if there's a before and after. It's probably the quickest way to tell people what we do. Do you recommend against like, or either using more photos or less photos, or how do you feel about that on pitch decks?
Oh, great question. We have a towards the tail end of the presentation, we have a best practices and pitfalls to avoid. We have a slide that says a picture's worth 1,000 bullets. So as long as there's like a clear, compelling headline, along with, you know, a photo that just is that can elicit emotion, and then also give an obvious, like hopefully our thing, like even here, okay, this has something to do with pitching, right? So the photos just speak directly to your solution without a question.
Okay, thank you.
Say, Calvin, it's Jeff Huber here. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Jeff.
Great. Hey, looking at the last letter in Soul, the leader's needs, and hoping you can unpack this just a bit more. Are you looking for the leader to sort of lay out educational background, business experience, and then launch into, hey, we're looking to source $500,000 for whether it be tooling or additional marketing or what have you? So we start with the leader's profile and then go into the ask. Can you unpack that just a bit more for me?
Great question. And the reality of it is, it really depends on how that story is flowing. So depending on how you transition from the you, it may make more sense at times to communicate the ask and the capital deployment, and then go to the YU. So it really depends on how your story is flowing. But the purpose of this L is to make sure you're capturing, if there is an ask and a capital deployment of those funds, you're putting that into the story. And then not forgetting to highlight why you, why your team, why now.
Right. Okay. Got it. So basically, I mean, that's just good advice. Make it coherent and sell your strong point either first or last, depending on what your ask is and what you're going to do with the money. Makes good sense. Thanks, Calvin.
Absolutely. And it's when you the reason those bullet points that we kind of did in the homework, usually even within those like leaders' needs and capability, like Chelsea and I are my COO, that may be filled with like 20 bullet points. And then it's up to us to get into the war room and say, all right, we don't have a lot of space. We don't have a lot of time. What do we feel is going to be most meaningful for this specific type of investor, for this specific type of customer? So even if I'm, pitching to someone that's at a university versus, entrepreneurial organization, really taking a walk in their shoes to really drill down on what's going to be meaningful to them.
I hear you. I could tell some funny stories about the team getting together and trying to determine what exactly is, the key points. What are we going to put in here? And kind of bashing it out a little bit to say, no, it's this, or no, it's this. So yeah, these are very helpful exercises just internally to the team, putting this stuff down so that the MinCup organizers can see this. A learning and growing experience for sure. Thanks, Calvin.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question. I was wondering about, so sending a set of slides in a PDF is kind of a unique medium that I'm not as familiar with. So it's different than like pitching in front of the room where you can kind of set it up and things. So I was just wondering if you had any like recommendations of like how to make sure that goes well. Just thinking like particularly of like the judge's experience of actually like scrolling through this thing.
Yeah, so we have a it may make sense to kind of dive into the next sections because we'll lay out, we hopefully lay out all of those ways to make sure you're clear and then also you're compelling.
Thanks.
And any other questions on the soul concept before we get into how we infuse some soul into our story, into our slide deck?
Yeah, hey Calvin, my name is Nick Howley. I'm with Co-Create-X. One of the challenges that we have is that our offering is kind of a new technology, and we don't know in what market it's going to be most kind of quickly or readily adopted. And we're often given the advice by people, you have to differentiate, you have to specify, one market that you're targeting. Our approach has generally been to make our product as generic as possible, offer it to a few different markets and hope that, one of them either outpaces all of the rest or that we can end up serving all of them, right? With targeted marketing to different markets depending upon what's growing well.
Got the same problem, man. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So any thoughts on that subject? I'd love to hear them.
From a positioning in the story perspective, or like, because where I've ran into trouble is like, why are you starting into the entrepreneurial market, blah blah, and I'd be curious as to.
Yeah. So just as an example, our product is highly effective at enabling collaboration and connectivity amongst students and their universities, right? But it's also really effective at connecting fans and their favorite musicians, just as two right, kind of disparate examples. It's the same exact product. There's literally no changes necessary between it, right? We can make it as generic as it needs to be to serve everybody equally well. And in fact, we can only afford to make it as generic as it can be to serve everybody equally well. And ultimately, the question then is, well, are you guys serving the education market or are you serving the music and entertainment market? And the answer is, we're serving both.
Until we know which one picks up the most steam.
Yeah, exactly right. Like wherever it grows the fastest, well, right. If a customer calls us and says, hey guys, we want you to build out some new functionality to make it more relevant to us, right? Then obviously we'll do that. But until somebody calls us and really, wants to spend a lot of money with us, we're kind of making it for everybody.
Yeah, so a few things to keep in mind, right? So number one, we've purposely say professionals in ours, just as an example, to kind of group it all. That's one. Number two, do you have any data to where you can prioritize with like educated logic on which one do you think will be the best, like which one will pick up the steam the fastest? Because that can be a way to just show your logic, and just kind of show the priority and the sequence of which ones you want to go after and why. in the absence of not knowing, I'd say that having some prioritization criteria would be the best bet to kind of overcome that hurdle. And then if you're pitching this, you can almost find out if you're pitching to someone who will give you flack for not being focused, I would have different pitch decks for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'll think about all of it, Calvin. Thank you very much for your opinions.
Anyone else on the concept of soul before we dive into how to infuse soul into your slides? So now we're going to talk about how to infuse soul into your slides. So some of the things we've heard as we've helped entrepreneurs out, how do I balance information overload? My solution is too complex to put everything on the 15 slides. So we had everybody do this homework, really just bullet putting out, answering these key questions. And this is ours right here. So throughout this portion of the presentation, we'll show what my company, Brevity, has done, and then we'd love to open it up to you guys to show within each section how you guys are positioning your slides. So our slide, I want to start with our slide recommendation based off of the 15 count, is obviously a cover slide, super important. And the more you can make it easier to understand what you do immediately on this cover slide, the better, especially for names of companies that don't necessarily explain what you do with the name of the company. Having a nice photo, a cover slide, or a log line that is simply, doesn't need to be more complicated. We help X. So when they pick up that cover slide, they're already got the planet to seed in their head. Oh, this is what they do. So I can kind of follow throughout there. Like, we don't want it to be a mystery too much on that cover slide. For the state the target audience and problem, 4 slides is our recommendation. Can be a little bit less, a little bit more, depending again on your solution, your industry, and how much background information that you think the audience will have. The O section outlining how and why your solution works, we recommend 4 slides. And then in terms of upside, potential, and proof, 3 slides. And then the leaders' needs and capability, 2 slides. And then we have a 2-slide appendix options. Again, these are just high-level recommendations. You could have an appendix slide count of 5. With some of the options there that I've run into in the pitches we had in Q1, a little bit more details in your go-to-market strategy, your sales pipeline. If you have anything about your IP or financial projections, those are pretty good things. Pricing, those are pretty good, recommendations to get into your slides. I'll stop here, because I know this was a question earlier. Any questions on the Brevity slide count recommendations for the Minnesota Cup?
I have a quick question for the appendix options. How necessary are these, or can we kind of spread out the other options? Like, is it important to find something to kind of fit into that realm?
I'm never a big fan of force-fitting anything. So if you can do without an appendix and you can add more meat, and say if there's a slide 3 in the leaders' needs and capability, by all means, definitely, insert that in there.
Okay, thank you.
Calvin, Jeff Huber again here, looking at your appendix options as well. You've got the go-to-market strategy. Well, some of us are already there, so we just sort of explain that. The pipeline, from whether or not we're going direct to retailers, or I would assume going through distributors, that type of thing. Financial projections, and then IP. So just lay out your IP, which you've done so far, whether or not you have patents or copyrights or that type
Correct.
of thing. Okay. All right.
Trademark.
I wondered if there were more to it.
Yeah. We have in ours, we have additional customer testimonials.
Okay.
That you'll kind of see here. again, like I've seen a lot of slides that highlight like very noisy slides that have like 7 or 5 customer testimonials with their faces. And
Right.
what we've done is highlight the most compelling one, and then we say, see appendix for additional customer testimonials.
Okay. And Jessica, do you, I know we're going to be doing our video as well, and we were hoping to put some customer testimonials there, Jessica, but do you recommend, and have you seen a successful pitch deck here with customer feedback on it?
Absolutely. I don't think it's a bad thing if they show up in both places.
Okay.
Customer testimonials are just so compelling if you have them, and if they're, they're really speaking to the benefits, and I would definitely say include them if you have them. But I agree completely with Kelvin's recommendation that, be thoughtful about which ones you include. And within that first 15 slides, be judicious about how you're using all of that slide real estate. And then you can always be more heavy-handed in an appendix and refer out to it. So if like you keep something really simple on a body slide, but say for more detailed financial information, see slide whatever in our appendix, or for additional customer testimonials, see slide whatever. That can often be a good way of making sure it is memorable, they don't get overwhelmed or have information overload, but they see the thoughtfulness and that like, wow, they really have a lot, that it tends to land really well that way. So I totally agree with what Kelvin shared.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Our product seems very simple, but the engineering behind it is quite complex. And I'm not going to get into that. It's just one of those things it's where the rubber hits the road is where the team sits down and figures out what is the compelling message we need to communicate in these 15 slides and how to get that done properly. So thank you both for that answer. That was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. I have a question. Lino Sullivan. I'm interested in the projection side. My market has a ubiquitous product to a known number of customers in Minnesota, for example. It has wide applicability. It's a vertical silo, if you will, market silo of one product that has huge horizontal scale out. Therefore, when I do my projections, I don't know what to project. Should I project billions of dollars over 5 years of a saturated United States, or what should I do? Just looking for any guidance or opinion.
Yeah, it's one of the, and I guess my question back to you is what's the common, because if you're pitching a venture, capital firm, right? Like they say they don't want to see hockey stick growth. Like I hate when startups show hockey stick growth, but when you don't have it, it's like, well, why don't your growth is a little bit slower than anticipated, right? So I guess the reason I bring that up is it really depends on the audience. I guess I would actually refer back to Jessica here in terms of the criteria, in terms of like, is accelerated hockey stick growth kind of a hidden requirement, or I would have to, because I know when I'm pitching, VCs, they want to see that hockey stick growth and have some good logic. But
yeah, that's a super good question. I would say, it's one of those things where it depends. More than anything, they want to make sure that any projected growth is realistic. So I agree with you, Kelvin, that sometimes our judges can be wary that when they see, okay, we're going to do these things for 2 months and then it's going to blow up. Like, they just really want to make sure that any financial, whether projections or your, idea of how you're going to grow, that's backed up by the steps you're going to take, and that you can tell that story, or back up that hypothesis on your part. So I would say that that's a short answer. I would also say that another aspect of that is it depends on how quickly you need or want to grow. So the example that Kelvin is sharing is a venture capital investor is going to need and expect pretty aggressive, like exponential growth for them to feel like it's worth putting their money into a company. But if you're not seeking venture capital investment, if you're looking at other ways of financing your growth, if you're going to get a bank loan, if you're bootstrapping, you don't need venture capital, then you don't need to grow that quickly, just for the purpose of being convincing or having that return. So it depends in a couple of different ways, and we do have, it's a good shout out because someone asked this question in the chat as well. We have a specific info session about financials, sort of how to display, how to convey in either tables or in graphics your financial information, that Lurie LLP, the accounting firm, is hosting tomorrow. So if other people have specific questions or want guidance on how to think about, or like what's the best way to get your financial information across, I'd recommend you check that event out tomorrow.
Thank you. Wonderful answers.
Okay, good. I was like, man, did that make sense?
Good question. Yeah, and having and Jessica nailed it. Having those, when we think about the key takeaways, you know, regardless of what the numbers are, having like 2 to 3, this is like supporting evidence as to why. So if you were to get to, you know, $1 million by year 3, and it would take, in your average selling price is 100,000 per unit, saying 10 clients by year 3, right? Having some small bullets that can kind of highlight why you got to what you're saying in this graph is also another good way to just point out and direct your audience as to what your logic is and how this is real, how this can become real.
Kelvin, it's Jeff Huber again. I got to jump in just one more time here. Say, some of us have been, you know, sort of in the marketplace and selling for a few years, but we got to talk about sort of the elephant in the room a little bit. COVID-19 knocked a lot of us back. I'm sure we weren't the only business that got smacked by that. And I'm wondering how to sort of, you know, and Jessica, pardon me if I'm jumping the gun here, this could be part of the financial projections, but I need to be able to tell a story that say, hey, when we came out of the box, we did this. And then we all got smacked by COVID-19, and my massive retailer said, yeah, we're going to hold off for a year or so. And attracting capital, both Kelvin and Jessica, with that type of story, I'm a little concerned with it, frankly, and how to characterize that in a way that is still positive. Look, we were on path, we got knocked back, and we still have the product, and we still want to move forward. But characterizing that properly, I'm frankly quite concerned with. Thanks.
Yeah, I can take that really quick, Jeff, if that's okay, Kelvin. And then I just want to make sure because I've seen this, Kelvin, I want to make sure you have ample time for some of the next sections you're going to walk people through. So Jeff, what I would say to that is that is extremely understandable and okay. Again, I'm speaking from like a Minnesota Cup, what our judges expect, what our process looks for and rewards. Our judges love a pivot. They love it when I think oftentimes, or sort of a common pitfall that we notice people experience is that they're wary of admitting things that they got wrong as they were iterating on their business or growing. But our judges love to see, and they really think highly of people and companies who try a thing, they learn that whether it worked or didn't work, adjust accordingly and bring something back to the market, or can be flexible, because of course, like, no one is going to start out an entrepreneurial journey and have every single thing happen the way that they hope it will. And I think that the same thing is true for investors, though I'm not an expert on those like fundraising contexts. So you don't have to like belabor the things that it went wrong, but being able to acknowledge, like, here's how we, and framing it as a positive of, COVID-19 was a surprise and really like caused us to stretch and have to pivot our approach. Here's how we handled that. Here's what we're planning to, like, here's what we did do. Here's what we're planning to do next. And even being honest about, we're going to learn a lot about how the market responds within the next 6 months. after which point we'll do one of these 3 things next. And like that level of thoughtfulness is really well received. So don't feel bashful about sharing something that didn't go well, whether it's attributed to COVID or just something else. That's very welcome. So
Okay. I wasn't sure whether or not there was almost sort of a template. Hey, everybody get hit by COVID-19, and this is sort of what the judges are expecting to hear.
Yeah, they're not really. I would say not.
Okay. Okay.
In some ways too, I mean, last year going through the competition sort of as COVID was unfolding was super interesting, and I would say a lot, if not every single business was affected in some way, but for, you know, some percentage of the companies that were competing, it actually helped some businesses because like a use case or a client base that they were like, we think this is really great and people will eventually need it. Like it really accelerated the need. Like we had a mask company that had competed a couple of other years. And so like that mask company did well last year, you know, like a breathing mask and like a number of other examples. So I can share more of those, but I don't, there are others definitely that were like, well, everything we thought we were going to do, we're not going to do anymore. And like we're building our plan. And those companies still had plenty of opportunity to do well in the process.
Yeah, makes sense. It just kind of cut down on our distribution plans and meeting with clients' plans, and that was it. And I was also really shocked that I forgot to stockpile 10 million masks. So thanks, Jessica, for pointing that out.
Yeah, no worries. No problem. But Kelly, I'll kick it to you really quick to just bring us back. I know we talked about
absolutely.
But yeah, the time it flies when I really appreciate that people have so many questions. I don't want to dissuade anyone. I just want to make sure we don't run out of time.
For sure. And I'll actually talk that. That's actually a compelling storytelling technique of bringing up that Achilles heel. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the third section. But where we're going to transition to now is walk through some examples just in terms of time. Would it be better if we showcase the examples from the volunteer versus going through mine, or what are you thinking, Jess?
I would say maybe start with yours. Just because I always think it's interesting, or like for speaking, like guessing on behalf of the group, like it'd be cool to see what your deck looks like. And then for you to use your own stuff as an example. But then for those of you who are maybe willing to throw up one of your own slides and get feedback from the group, or have Kelvin sort of assess things on the fly, would you maybe just shout that out in the chat? Because if you don't, we have a bunch of other examples stockpiled, but we want it to be about you if we can. But yeah, no one's going to be forced to throw their pitch deck up if they don't want to.
Perfect. So and we didn't include every single element, but you guys have seen a few already. But this is, before we had the, 90% of presentations are forgotten. But I'm going to stop here and just do like a 5 Mississippi on each slide. So. And then I'll stop here. If anyone has any, we're still reconstructing ours, any comments, feedback, or questions on how we chose, how a few of our slides fit within the state to target audience and problem.
Hi, this is Patty Radford Henderson. And one thing I'm wondering is, I've got in my product roadmap, I have some lofty feature addition goals. And I'm just wondering how far out I should go when I'm talking about the plan for my product. Right now, I've got an MVP that I'm able to sell. And I could really tell that story, but then I can also talk about, okay, it's a SaaS product, so there's a base price, but I'm looking at adding more robust features that would have tiers. do I want to just go as far as I can with what's in my head, or do I want to just stick with kind of the base core problem solution?
I would stick with the base, and there's two areas where you can start, where you can highlight kind of the what's coming next. That could be in the upside, proof, and potential section. But then we have even in our pitch deck, full pitch deck, we have a really nice product roadmap, and we have that actually in the appendix slide.
Okay, great.
Any other?
Stating what Kelvin had asked, did you all follow the story he told with these slides? I realize some of them look similar to what you covered in the beginning, Kelvin, but the purpose, you know, 5 Mississippiing through those is to show you, like, give you an example of this is what his pitch deck says about why brevity exists. So we, you know, if any of you have your slides that you want to share, otherwise I could throw up another example, Kelvin, in case that helps people, because
they've already seen that. Yep.
Cool. I hope that's helpful to people. I'm going to do it really quick, and then you can let me know in the chat, like, what's useful and what's not. I have like 14,000 things open, which Jamie can attest is very typical. So I'm going to try my best not to show you something weird or have it be confusing. Okay. So this is the pitch deck of Busy Baby, who Beth has been super generous in letting us share different parts of her content and pitch deck and videos throughout. So when it comes to stating the problem in the target audience, she hits those really quickly right at the top. So this is technically the slide right after the cover slide. I'm going to minimize it a little bit so you can see the whole thing. But yeah, lots of photos. States the problem. I would say, like, there are some things I like about the design, and some things that I think could even be better. So it's not like this is the gold standard, but just in terms of getting across those points that Kelvin was just highlighting. And here's our second slide, the solution. So there's a lot of visuals here, and any way and place and time that visuals can support the words and vice versa, it's such an effective way to get the information across. So yeah, I'll stop there, but these two slides hit on, like, Beth never saw Kelvin's presentation, but she's in the past, like, nailing what he described to all of you. So that's just another example if it helps for you to see something that's a product, whereas Kelvin's is more of a SaaS plus service option.
And I would point out, having seen Beth's slides, a good take-home message is that we saw multiple iterations of this, and Beth constantly had different people looking at them and giving feedback. People who didn't know, people who knew, me and Jessica. So I think that sometimes is really key, is to not have the same people looking at the same slides over and over. Because you'll get, and what is amazing about Beth is she took every nugget of feedback and implemented it every time, and didn't just say, I got it, it's good enough. So I think that's a really good message about Beth's story.
It's funny, it's ironic, I'm working with Beth right now.
Yeah, she is awesome, and, like, is so both really good at what she does, but also is always trying to improve. So it doesn't surprise me that she's working with you, Kelvin. That's great.
Any volunteers on how they're positioning their state to target audience and problem that'd like to share? If not, we can move on. Perfect. So outlining how and why your solution works. So again, I'll just stop talking and hopefully let the slides sit on their own, and hopefully it's easy to understand. Perfect. I'll stop there. Hopefully those Mississippis weren't too fast, but any comments, feedback, constructive feedback, what's working well, does it make sense? This is one of those ones that we're definitely revising ourselves, but we'd love to hear the feedback from the crowd.
I am super,
oh.
sorry.
Okay, I was just gonna say, this would just be a clarification question I had, but given it's 1, 2, 3, in terms of like purchasing the solution, do you start with 1 and go to 2 and then to 3, or it's 3 different solutions? I know you had it cyclical, but like if I were to purchase it, and I just needed help with 1 section, how would that work? Yeah, that would just be the questions I would have after viewing that.
Yeah, that's good feedback for us.
Is that a human
right?
feedback loop?
Yeah, so you're asking like, how does the first interaction work, like from the swipe of the card to where we were doing was just focusing on the different phases of our product.
Got it. Yep. Cool.
Yeah, I feel like I just have have this excellent universal jinx that as soon as I attempt to jump in and say something to fill the silence, then someone else wants to speak up. So I apologize in advance if I do that again. But
I had a question, if it's still open. This is Lino again. I'm looking at the audience for the sales pitch. How do you, can your audience move around? Do you have to have the audience totally knowable on the first slide? You're a XYZ person. Where does audience fit in, please?
The audience.
Yeah, for the slide, am I talking to investors? Am I talking to customers? Am I talking to judges? Who's my audience? And I assume I'm talking to customers, but maybe I should be talking to investors.
Oh, so this would be how and why it works for your customers.
Customers, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I just want to ask a clarifying question, Lino. Do you mean, because I could see it both. They're like Kelvin's slides are describing how his solution would work for their customers whom they're selling to.
Yes.
But the audience for the whole deck would be someone he's trying to get to invest in the business. So it's a little meta. It's like the whole deck is sharing their story and sort of how the process works with an external audience. Like he's not going to share this pitch deck with a customer, but this section of slides 1, 2, 3 is describing the journey for a customer.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jessica, what if you're self-funding? So I'm not looking for investors.
Yeah, amazing. Then, I mean, it's all a little hypothetical. Most of the time we describe the audience for this pitch deck because the immediate obvious audience is a Minnesota Cup judge, but we want you to work on something that would have use outside of our process. Because having presentations like this are really helpful whether you're seeking funding or not. So like a couple of other scenarios or situations you could think about is, what if you really wanted to hire or work with someone and you sent them an email and this was an attachment you were sharing to give them like a quick 5-minute overview of your business. So like that's not an investor, but it's someone you want to potentially understand your company in a simple, like efficient way. Another scenario would be if you are, I can't think of another example, but there's like, what other, we say like whether it's a Min Cup judge or a partner, like maybe you have a strategic partnership and you're trying to, like anyone that you want to both explain your idea, why your company is going to work. Like there's other use cases for that where having a solid pitch deck like that, like this is really helpful, even if you're not going to raise capital.
Yeah, I say prospects, customers, employees, suppliers, are some of the common ones where you're trying to influence. This is a solely is around influencing, and in order to influence, they need to understand what you're doing and why it matters.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to jump in, Kelvin, in response to your original question of any feedback or other people that would want to like speak about how these slides, like how effective they are or other things. I love, this is like maybe a little too myopic, but I love that you have a screenshot of your actual interface on a laptop image, because it helps drive home or reinforce that people are going to be interacting with your business and purchasing or, you know, experiencing your content online. And you, that like visualizing that the way that you have, that's just, I just understand that intuitively without you having to say it on the slide. So that it's like, to your point about a picture's worth 1,000 bullets, like you, the slides are really clean. There's not a ton of text. It's easy to follow because you're using that graphic.
Thank you. I'll tell Chelsea.
Yeah, I already know she's awesome, so I like it.
I'm sorry, I also want to give some feedback on the 3 slides. However, I know that it's past 3. Is that okay? Do we still have time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
3:30, right?
Yeah, we have until 3:30. Yep.
Oh, awesome, cool. So in this case, I wanted to ask, so in this the 3 slides, you're basically showcasing the primary features of your product. Now, given that, you know, the intention here is to actually present the issues and problems that you are trying to solve for your audience, do you think, can we generalize this approach and say that by showcasing features, you're basically using these slides to explain the problems? And is that a good best practice?
Without a question, because so when we talk about, if we go back to the problem slide where we had 2 verbose missing key, let's take missing key elements that your audience desires. So we kind of say this distills the essential elements needed in your pitch. So we're tying some of the issues we talked about in the very beginning and talk about how we solve those. So like simplification of messaging, when we say not communicating in layman's terms, well, pitch intelligence solves that issue here. So we try and, every time we highlight the feature, we always try and identify, just explicitly communicate the problem that's being solved.
Okay, so as a follow-up then, why did you consider doing this, that is like separating the solution from the problem, than to say basically use one slide for stating one problem and then presenting the solution for it? Do you think, was there I'm just trying to see if you considered that and rejected it for some reason.
So so if I'm understanding, you're basically asking, why didn't we go problem solution?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Great question. So again, with the SOUL framework, I want people to have like I want them to really dissect what those issues are. First, have a real concept of, okay, they're identifying these issues. I think it's just a little bit cleaner to not be so like truncated in the approach. It's, going problem solution is not really necessarily a sequential flow. So that's kind of why we did it that way.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. One more thing, if I may. So, so I noticed that you have basically a slide separating the different parts of your deck. Do you think we can afford that, given that we only have 15 slides?
Which slide separated?
So if you go back a couple of slides, I noticed, yes. So this is basically that blue screen. Was that a slide?
So this was no, this isn't a part of our pitch deck. This is kind of, sorry about that.
No worries.
This was more so like, hey, we're going to dive into these 3 slides that fit the O section.
Okay, cool, awesome.
And no, you guys don't have that real estate to do that.
Yeah.
Jessica, do you want to go with the?
Maybe just keep going. Like I will
Yeah.
try to save Beth's for the end and then I can fly through them. But I want to make sure, because I love all of these other people's like questions and feedback too.
Perfect. So my favorite part, upside potential and proof. So the way we attack this is just one, oh, let me stop. 5 Mississippi. Any questions, comments, or feedback? Oh, sorry, there's another one, sorry. And I think those are only 2. Any questions, comments, feedback on how we approached upside potential and proof?
I think my first observation here was that I didn't realize this was a testimonial. I don't know if other people had that thought.
Yeah, it took me a second too, but then I saw where we were going.
How could we improve that? That's a good point. Maybe have
You could just put testimonial in white in part of the pink text on the left, like above her photo.
Thank you.
Also, you could add a quote from her in quotes.
You don't think that would potentially be too noisy, or you think that would still?
Well, actually, Kelvin, maybe I want to reframe something. I think this isn't a testimonial. This is a case study.
Yeah.
To her point, if it were a testimonial, it would be her words, and this is just more sharing. Here's what happened and like what her outcome was, which is so like that's. I mean, that's maybe something to play around with.
Case study would be absolutely dynamite. Great. That's great feedback. Any other questions or comments? No, we got 23 minutes. If not, I'll move on to the next section. Leaders' needs and capabilities. So we have one slide. We have more than one slide, but we just use one example. And this is it right here. Any questions, comments, or feedback on this slide?
Do you recommend including additional background, but more than just like their title, like a little brief summary, or simpler the better?
Simpler the better. So this is one of our leaders' needs and capability slides. We have a team one that I may be able to quickly pull up. One sec.
Yeah, I was going to ask that same question, Kelvin. I was curious, like, what do you say about yourself as the CEO, or like how much real estate do you give to certain team members versus others?
Yeah, so this is actually one from an older company I used to work at. Do you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
So what they've done is they kind of highlighted some of the logos that they used to work at. I think that's a pretty effective way to, and then just a small snippet in terms of the experience. So it's not too much, but then you get a glimpse like, oh, this person worked in tech, this person worked in, investment banking, but a short snippet that gives, some awareness as to who the leadership team is and what they've achieved in their career. But it's not.
Are the logos at the bottom companies that those people have worked for, or are those clients, or what?
Companies they've worked for.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
Cool. What we'll get into now is I'll quickly just kind of highlight best practices, pitfalls to avoid as we're creating these decks, and then I guess we can save the last portion of going through Busy Baby's slide deck. Sweet. So we said it a few times. Jamie's brought it up. Jessica's brought it up. Share, revise, 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 revise. Right? It's not, you're rarely ever going to get it on the first try. So the more feedback that you can get from a wide variety of people, the better. One thing to note when getting feedback that I think is super useful is like seeking to understand, because not all feedback is good feedback. So just be kind of cautious of just sending this out to anybody and everybody. But when you do receive feedback, make sure you seek to understand where they were coming from, putting it through your own filtering system to see if it really makes sense for you. Less is more, brevity, you know, so that's just kind of a common principle we have. This one's important. Consider the information the information your audience already possesses. So if it's a very technical product with a lot of jargon, you may need to do some more upfront education. So by the time that S section is complete, they really understand the problem you're solving in layman's terms. But the quicker with brevity, we're trying to help clear and compelling, you know, communication. We can spend a little bit less time on the actual problem and get more into the O of how we solve it and why the solution works. Slide design is critical, right? So I'm not a great designer myself, so see, these are a few options. You know, I don't love PowerPoint. You know, my consulting days, I had to use a lot of PowerPoint, but the new software available, pitch.com, beautiful.ai, SlideBeam are incredible, low cost, you know, automated design. They fix your formatting instantaneously. Pitch.com is awesome. Obviously Google Slides is great. If you have a freelancer, Fiverr and Upwork are pretty good options to hire a freelancer. That's not too costly. Digital Polo is also a monthly subscription service where you can get unlimited marketing materials mocked up. I think it's about like 120 a month. They're solid, but I'd love to learn from the crowd too, is from a design for slide design, layout, and formatting, anything that's been helpful to you guys that you can share with the group.
Well, if I could jump in for just a second, it's Jeff Huber. Jessica, I will point this toward you. And thank you, Calvin. My next question was for the tech poor individuals out here, people that don't like tech so much, what would you be using? And Jessica, do all of these work in terms of saving these slides in an acceptable format and PDF for the judges?
Yes, 100%.
Thank you very much, Jessica. That's all I needed.
Yep. Yeah, and just in response, Dion also mentioned Canva. And I agree that Canva has both a free and like a slightly fancier paid version that have, but still even the paid version is pretty low cost. That Canva is a design tool, so you don't get a human behind it working on it for you, but they have so many different template options. And we use at MinCup, we use Canva all the time for different design purposes. So. But yeah, everything that I would second everything that Kelvin shared. There's so just more and more options all the time, and I think it's every year. Jamie can attest to this too. Like you'd be surprised how bad looking of things people submit, and it's always such a bummer. It's unfortunate because then the presentation is getting in the way of someone paying attention to their story, because they're like, whoa, wow, the colors are like, if you're using clip art from 1998, like those are just things that will get in the way of your audience really receiving the messages that you're trying to send. So you don't need, just like the video, you don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to hire a super fancy graphic designer to do it for you. There's a lot of different options out there, but definitely consider and put some thoughtfulness into making sure that they either look good or at least just simple enough that it's not distracting.
And then the next one we have here is, after each slide, what's the one, asking yourself the question, what's the one thing someone needs to know from this slide? So for example, when, I forgot who it was, but it took me a while, Kelvin, to understand, was this a testimonial? Well, now I have good feedback from the group. All right, putting on that headline, case study. Okay, this is where they're showing and proving the results from a customer. So really thinking about, okay, what's the one thing I need to know? I need someone to know from this slide, and then having a compelling headline for it. Rule of thumb comes from my COO. Never more than 7 lines, never more than 7 words per line. If you guys want a rule of thumb of what's too much text, I would almost go 6 by 6 to even make it more concise, but this is a common rule of thumb that we've seen in the market. My favorite, a picture's worth 1,000 bullets. Who was it? I think it was Jeff who brought up this question earlier. It's actually a really great storytelling technique to proactively bring up a concern with your solution. You know, COVID was, tough for a lot of different businesses, but not trying to hide that and using that into your story. It's called like an all is lost moment. It weirdly can get your, I don't know the psychological like methodology here, but it can weirdly draw the audience in. Too many times we try and hide our Achilles heel, but showcasing your Achilles heel and then coming back with how you already have overcome it or will overcome it is a very great way to get the audience brought in. One common thing I see is a way to just stand out is using compelling headlines with your key takeaway. So a lot of pitch decks say problem statement. Why can't you describe the problem in actual words as a compelling headline? That's a really good way to stand out, because a lot of different startups just go with problem statement, solution. Why can't you describe our solution helps improve pitch clarity, blah, blah, blah. Obviously keep it short, but I think using compelling headlines is a more effective way to stand out. My favorite section, methods to create memorability. So now you have the first phase, you want to make sure someone understands your product, why it's important. But if 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, how can you infuse tools to make sure people remember it? They're at the best bus stop and they're triggered by your startup idea. Oh, that reminds me of Busy Baby, right? So hooks are super, super great ways to get the audience engaged. The hook I think we use for brevity towards the tail end of our deck is, what do we say? We think it's going to become a common phrase to hear, are you pitching with brevity? So we're using our own name in a creative way to make sure someone doesn't forget. Common references can also be a great way to create that memorability. We call ourselves, we're creating a Grammarly for pitching. If anyone's ever used the writing enhancement tool, Grammarly, if they have and that may not always be a good reference for us if someone's never used Grammarly, but if someone's used Grammarly, oh, I get it quicker. That's what they're doing. They're using AI, but in a different context. Analogies and metaphors can also be an amazing way to create memorability. My favorite one for brevity is, and we have like a photo of a bunch of cars being stuck in traffic. We say that pitching without brevity is like traffic at rush hour. They struggle to go far. Right? So how can you infuse analogies and metaphors, and then rhymes and repetitions throughout the presentation can also be good ways is to create that memorability. What was missed today? I don't know if Jessica, you want to take over, or we can kind of open up to the group. Any other?
This would be another great time that if there's something you're specifically wrestling with or you're wondering that you don't feel like Kelvin spoke to for your own presentation or the story you're trying to tell, like, please share. I can share a couple of other examples, but I'd love to have you all speak and ask your own questions first. Kristen, do you have something else you wanted to ask?
Did you say Kristen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I am going to be adding into what Jeff had mentioned about COVID-19. We had opened a day before everything shut down. So I guess my question is, I don't want to rely on it too much, but that was our first year of business. And it is clearly, tragic, but I don't want it to define us either. So I'm trying to figure out, clearly we had to pivot about 85 million times in order to survive the first year. But I also just, I want to be able to talk about that, but really talk about what we want to really be doing with our business. But part of the process with Minnesota Cup is we need the help to just get back on track, because there's a lot of pieces to pick up from year one.
I have a question, if I may. This is Lino again.
Yeah, Lino, do you mind if we respond to
please.
first? Got it. I want to let you answer too if you have a perspective, Kelvin. I would say, Kristen, I have like two different thoughts, and then we can totally talk more about it offline or when you have like a draft of something. And this goes for all of you. I'm super, super happy. Jamie and I both have office hours and specific sort of coaching sessions that are set aside in July to walk through things with people in more detail, because sometimes it is hard to extrapolate or say, like, in this situation, what would you do without seeing it? But one thing that you could consider, Kristen, is just to block out, like, use Post-its or use pieces of paper, or use real slides, and to Kelvin's point, write down, like, what are the 15, 20, 10 key messages that you want to make sure people walk away with knowing, and then build the story in underneath. Then you can move things around. You can say, like, oh, does the story make more sense if we say this sentence first? It's like that, like using something really tangible and physical and just seeing, where does that comment about COVID was a rough year, but here's how we've grown and what we learned from it. Like, you state that it was a problem, but you quickly move on to, but we handled it. Here's what we're doing next. Here's what we learned. That can be really effective. But yeah, like, I think you could look at that problem in a couple different ways. You could look at it as, like, we've already dealt with and navigated problems, and here's how we handled them and what we're doing differently or instead. Another one that maybe would go later in the deck is more of what Kelvin described at the end of, like, here are potential risks we may encounter and how we'll tackle them should they arise, which is more of a, we're looking way out ahead to the future, and we're not stuck in like one path to success that if something doesn't go perfectly well, that we're screwed. It's like more about displaying that you're forward thinking. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can speak to issues without it feeling like wah wah, you just make it seem like you're a good, capable, flexible leader.
Okay. And if it doesn't seem to make sense in the pitch deck, is that something that I could add into like an appendix, where if something doesn't quite fit, that's a place where we can add
Absolutely.
things like that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and the upside proof and potential section is a good place to infuse that all is lost moment. Like,
yeah,
hey, this is what it is, right? But
Yeah.
this is how this is how we overcame, and this is how we're going to continue to thrive.
Okay,
And this is the logic to back it up.
cool. Okay, thank you guys.
And Lino, do you want to go next? I'm sorry I cut you off before, but
Oh, yeah, I apologize for going on. One last question. I'm interested in your opinions on whether using like illustrations, cartoon characters, mascots, humor, and any advice on those probably unusual ways of communicating. Thank you.
Cartoons and humor. It would be hard for me to give a strong opinion without seeing it, so I don't want to misspeak here, but I would have to evaluate, like, see the design. I have seen people using not necessarily real people, and it comes off in a very tasteful, professional manner. I think that can work, but I would have to see the design and the type of humor before I'd give a strong opinion either way.
Thank you.
yeah, I would ditto that. I think that can be used super effectively. And then humor, or like getting your audience to feel some emotion or care, or like see something that's a little bit out of the ordinary or less dry. Like I'm a big fan of that, but it can also go the other way and be distracting or like look bad, and then it's a detraction. So I agree that like it can be done really well, but it just depends on what it looks like and how you're using it. So feel free to follow up or maybe share an example or a draft if you have one down the road, Lino, and I can offer more feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, like I said, this has been awesome. Thank you guys for having me. Jamie, Jessica, this has been fun. I learned a lot. Hopefully you guys learned a lot as well. Contact me if you guys have any questions. And then if you guys want to sign up to be, we have beta testing for our product that's going to launch this fall. Contact Chelsea at brevitypitch.com to sign up as a beta tester to get early access to a tool that hopefully helps you create clear and compelling pitches.
Yeah, Kelvin, thank you so much. There is so much more that I would love to say or share or help. Jamie and I will be sharing again, once more on the Google site, some more sign-up opportunities for one-on-one coaching and feedback on your deck. Super highly recommend that you take advantage of it, but don't feel like you need to wait to only get feedback from us. Think about those people in your spaces, in your networks that you can keep sharing, get their reaction, use some of the tools and techniques that Kelvin recommended, like asking them, what do you remember about that? Or if I just give this slide deck to you without saying a thing about it, tell me what your impressions are or what you think my business is about. Like any of those tools and feedback can be so powerful. So highly, highly recommend that you start working on your story, get feedback early and often, as Kelvin mentioned, and ask for help and reach out to your fellow semifinalists or others in your network to make this as strong of a storytelling tool as you can. We definitely hear that the pitch deck is probably the most often used deliverable or item that people create in the Minnesota Cup process. So anytime you invest into putting it together now, I know will pay off for you in the future when you have this polished document ready to use. So yeah, just thank you again so much to Kelvin, and thanks to all of you for being so participatory and asking such good questions. And we'll sign off now, knowing that we've just got a minute or two left, unless I'll pause one more time and see if anyone wants to speak up with any last thoughts or questions.
Thanks for both your help. This is Jeff. Kelvin, I appreciate it. I like that soul layout. We'll be using it, referring to it, coming back to this presentation. So thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Kelvin.
Awesome.
Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you soon.
All right now. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.